Coleman Report Live, interesting times edition. We have editor Katie Watucky. We have Chris Hearn, CEO of Fountainhead Capital. We have Lance Sexton with his official Coleman Publishing Coleman Report cough drops. And Marty Techler with Blank Rome out of Washington, D.C. Katie, let's start with you. What's going on?
Well, last night, Bob calls me and says, hey, did you see the news? And Trump said, well, we're going to be giving an additional $50 billion to the SBA to try to help with the coronavirus outbreak. And at this time, we're not really sure how he intends to use that $50 billion. I watched a little bit of the meeting this morning, and it sounds like they're working closely with Trump and some of the other SBA officials to try to decide how we're going to use this and how we're going to implement it.
Marty, you're our eyes, our boots on the ground in Washington, D.C. You're the former House Counsel, Small Business Counsel?
Deputy General Counsel at the SBA.
Okay. What is your take? How do you think this will pan out?
Well, there'll definitely be some directed disaster lending based on a disaster declaration that will be made and has been made with respect to the COVID-19 virus. And there appears to be a move toward providing some of that $50 billion through the 7A, SBIC, and 504 programs that SBA administers. What the makeup of the distribution is unknown at this point.
Well,
and
to put this into context, I mean, last year we did $43 billion, and now he wants an additional $50 billion.
Well, yeah, Chris, those three programs generally do between 40 and 45 billion for the last two fiscal years themselves. But the speech appeared to indicate that an additional 50 was coming to SBA to provide capital for small businesses to alleviate the implications of the disaster that's taking place, or of the impact of the COVID-19 virus on the small business community. Again, if the $50 billion were to come in through the 7A, 504, and SBIC programs, that would double and a little bit more the appropriation that's available for them this year under present law. The use of the disaster declaration indicates that there will be a supplemental appropriation that may comprise part of that $50 billion that will be available to make disaster loans, which are different than 7A and 504 and SBIC financing.
Well, I was watching the speech last night, and my first phone call was to Chris. And I nearly fell out of my chair because I thought he was going to say 50 million, and then it was a B, and we had to go back and check our DVDs.
We both went back and re-listened, and then I turned on my closed caption and rewound and watched it again, and about an hour later we got confirmation. No, he did say billion with a B. Yeah.
What I find amazing is I've been around for a while. Katie hasn't, but Lance and I and Chris and Marty have. Very few times in a presidential speech do you hear the term small business administration. State of the Union, it gets never mentioned. Campaign doesn't get mentioned. But for him to go out there and do this, I think is significant. But the other thing that happens back in 2009, we had a $50 billion stimulus for guess who? General Motors. And taxpayers wrote off about $11 billion of that. And they ended up getting a loan for about $60,000 per employee, if my math is right. So I don't know. Chris, I'll go with you, then I'll go to Lance.
Well, it's an interesting point. I actually thought about that myself. I don't remember what the total bailout dollar figure was. I think it was well over 200 billion.
Well, just for General Motors alone was 50 billion. Yeah, right, the entire auto industry. Yeah.
the fact that we're not talking about large companies right now who presumably
It's
have better,
amazing.
stronger
It's
balance
amazing.
sheets, we're,
Yeah.
we're focused just on the small business community who will be the hardest hit. I think that's pretty interesting, and hopefully we can get all the details here soon. I've talked to some higher ups at SBA this morning, and we're probably going to be a couple days away from knowing some more of the details. But as soon as that comes out, we're going to need to put the capital on the streets as fast as possible to save jobs and save businesses and ultimately
Lance, I
save
assume
lives.
SBA is going to act with great speed to get this done.
Yeah, I think, and we keep talking about the release of the SOP. It might come a little later because this is a key issue. Bob, I'm going to talk about what I wish. I wish in this additional funding, they will give participant lenders not carte blanche, but at least some flexibility. Loan increases probably would be the most impactful thing. SBA borrowers you currently have a loan with that are struggling, being able to increase their loan and give them some working capital would be significant. But giving us the opportunity to deploy this capital, which it sounds like that's going to happen, but I've already gotten a couple of calls from small business borrowers. 85% of the product they sell comes from China. Their problem is not a lack of business, Bob. It's a lack of inventory right now. They don't have enough inventory to fill the orders that they have. Thus, they have cash flow issues right now. And we're going to see, as these cancellations, the NCAA tournament now is going to be empty gymnasiums. The South by Southwest Music Festival, Bob, I like to rock, is going to have a huge impact on Austin. But it's not just the festival, the tournament. It is the small restaurant, the small boutique that is located in that same community. SEC tournament, guys. I'm from Arkansas. The Razorbacks won last night. There was a crowd there, and there was a huge booing. And the booing was not related to the game. It was related to the announcement that fans would not be able to participate in today's game. They're basically being sent home. So all those small restaurants, retail stores, service businesses are going to be impacted, and we need to be able to deploy working capital to them to help them through this
SBA
period.
yesterday sent out a notice on deferments.
That's right.
Servicing and deferments, and that was in your email. It should be linked to the GoToWebinar dashboard. Be sure and review that. Katie will be covering that as well. And let's go to
Hey,
our poll
Bob,
question.
can I make one quick comment on Don't be afraid of deferments. There are so many banks that are. Don't be afraid. Help your small business borrower.
The reason why I asked Marty Tekler on before the world went south is he's an expert on SBICs and opportunity zones. And Marty, this is for you. We'll see if people are lending into opportunity zones. Wow.
Well, opportunity zones were created by virtue of last year's or 2 years ago's tax bill. And the intention there was to stimulate investment in real estate and businesses located in areas of higher unemployment and low and moderate income. The impetus for doing that, as far as the opportunity zones are concerned, was to create, by governor determination, a number of opportunity zones across the country that fit the definition of having high unemployment and low and moderate income, and designating those as opportunity zones, and then creating a vehicle called an opportunity zone fund, qualified opportunity zone fund, that could be established to invest in real estate and businesses located in those designated areas. And the tax benefit to be derived by that legislation and designation was to enable capital gains to be deployed into funds, qualified opportunity zone funds, that would then be used by those qualified opportunity zone funds to make the investments. And if those capital gains were deployed into the Opportunity Zone funds within the required periods of time from the date that they were generated, they would avoid taxation, capital gains taxation that would ordinarily be applied to them. So far, the Opportunity Zone funds that have been established, and our firm does quite a bit of establishing Opportunity Zone funds, and I work in that area, have been devoted primarily to real estate investment and not so much investment in small businesses located in Opportunity Zones. There have been some that have been utilized for that purpose, but the majority has been utilized to make real estate investments in the Opportunity Zones.
Well, I know I was
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Marty, but I was in Puerto Rico last year, and the entire island is an Opportunity Zone.
Yes, the whole island of Puerto Rico has been designated as an Opportunity Zone, primarily because of the devastation that Puerto Rico suffered with the weather disasters that they've incurred.
Can I jump in here for just a second, Bob? I think the problem, the Opportunity Zone legislation, the issue with it, I don't think, and you hear a lot about it, you've heard a lot about it over the last couple of years, but I think the problem has been they took a long time to promulgate the rules and the regs. And as it relates to whatever this $50 billion disaster loan program is going to be through SBA, I hope, and they've done this before and other times in the past, last 20 some years, have been a couple other instances of this. And if they really want to be effective this time, they have to really hustle to get this information out. They need to err on the side of speed while trying to balance that with caution, obviously, and responsibility. But, if this disaster program rolls out like the Opportunity Zone program rolled out for the last 2 years, it's ultimately going to land with a thud, and it's not going to have the effect.
It's not going to roll out that way, Chris. I've been privy to some of the legislation that's circulating on the Hill, and in each case, regardless of what the purpose of the intended legislation is in terms of getting money out for this COVID-19 issue, the legislation contains provisions that indicate that the rules are to be proposed and promulgated on an emergency basis, and
I hope so.
in some instances as short as 2 weeks, which is hard to imagine happening, but that they have learned that lesson. And they do want to get this promulgated and implemented as quickly as possible.
SBA's moved fast in the past. In 2008, when the secondary market froze up, there was big discussion about, hey, we need to be able to tie our base rate to LIBOR because prime was not an attractive investment. And Marty, they got that out within 3 weeks, 4 weeks? You remember that one?
Yeah, it can be done when there's this kind of impetus. The Opportunity Zone legislation, interestingly, I mean, it's very extensive, and there are a lot of moving parts to it.
Marty, wrap it up. Does a bank have to be part of a fund? Logistically, how does this work?
The Opportunity Zone Fund program doesn't lend itself well to bank investment. Ultimately, a bank could be an investor in an Opportunity Zone Fund and derive CRA credit for the investment, because the objective of the Opportunity Zone Fund is to make investments in areas of high unemployment and low and moderate income, and that would get the bank CRA credit. But banks don't have capital gains to invest, or for the most part don't have capital gains to invest. Some of their affiliates might. But that in itself makes the Opportunity Zone Fund opportunity not that attractive to a bank investor. I did want to talk about SBICs a little bit,
quick,
and I'll do that when you want me to do it now?
Yeah. Do it now. Give me, but hold it down to a minute because we have a bunch more news. Go ahead, Marty.
Sure. SBICs are private equity funds that SBA licenses and leverages, and they are exclusively required to make investments in small businesses. And banks do get dollar for dollar Community Reinvestment Act credit for investments in SBICs. So banks have found it attractive to invest in SBICs, and there's an exception from the Volcker rule in the Dodd-Frank legislation for bank investment in SBICs that enables banks to invest in SBICs that in turn invest in small businesses to be exempt from the prohibition on banks investing directly in small businesses that is in the Volcker rule. So that is an attractive investment for a bank, and that's something that I do a lot of for banks, both as investors and forming their own SBIC funds.
Marty, how many banks take advantage of this legislation or this concept?
In the SBIC program,
Yes.
Most of the large money center banks are involved, and a multiple number of smaller regional banks are involved in investing in and forming SBICs.
Well, I would, my takeaway on this is take a look at that, give Marty a call. Marty's a friend. He's a co-sponsor of our Secondary Market Summit in December. But this is a question dear to Lance's heart.
Yeah.
Because I know you're going to answer, Lance.
I received an email earlier this week, Bob, that our institution is restricting travel and attendance at conferences. They put a date of March 31st. We'll see where that goes.
And the third question is obviously a hot topic. Is telecommuting an option for your job bucket?
Hey, Bob, the interesting thing, my understanding is USC and Stanford are not holding classes on campus. Can you believe the University of Arkansas is considering after spring break, no more on-site classes?
It's, you know, now you had these kids, we're talking with Katie, your brother, your fiance.
My sister last night,
Sister.
really late, we had to go get her all of her stuff out. She's got to be out of school by Sunday.
Wow.
And she goes to Pepperdine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. This just hit this morning. We will do a webinar on it, but this is the recap of the 10 tab purchase. Lance, I don't think you've even had a chance to see that. So we will announce that. And obviously this was last week's news, and we were all excited that you know, it was $20 million for disaster administrative staffing. And obviously, I mean, this is still in place, but we have a lot of new things. Hey, Chris, actually, I'm going to go to Lance and talk about deferments.
Well, the thing, Bob, the information notice came out. There's nothing new in here. We've always been able to do this. And if you read the SOP clearly states that a participant lender, your goal should be to help the small business entity repay the loan. If they're running through a tough spot, it doesn't matter if it's a health epidemic like we currently have or a new street being constructed in front of the business. The deferment has always been there. I think SBA just wanted to remind everybody that this is a tool that you have to help a small business that's struggling because of a sales decrease, cash flow issues. I think that I don't think you can do deferments on 7A loans, 504 loans, microloans. They all allow for deferment of payments. The other thing that's fun, Bob, is frequently you'll see a bank do a interest-only payment deferment. Well, the bulk of the payment is interest. So, guys, please consider principal and interest payment deferments during a difficult period of cash flow. Saving them a couple $100 a month is not going to do anything.
Chris, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. Speaking of cash flow, how important is the proposal to have a 0% payroll tax rate for the rest of this year?
I mean, obviously it's going to put more money in everyone's pockets, keep money in their pockets, which, you know, I'm kind of reminded in the days after 9/11. I was thinking about this last night when George W. Bush was reminding people that he wanted to get America back to the business of America. And unfortunately or fortunately, it's very interwoven with, you know, our economic output. And, this is one of those things. If you want people to feel a bit better about paying a little bit more for toilet paper on eBay, then they might need a few percentage points left in their wallet.
Hey, Chris,
I think it'll help. Yeah, go ahead, Lance. I'm sorry.
Funny that you mentioned toilet paper, Chris. I needed to get some toilet paper yesterday, and for those of you who don't know, I live 15 miles from Walmart headquarters. So if a Walmart in my area is out of a product, Walmarts across the country probably have an issue. I go to Walmart for toilet paper, none, zero. So, guys, it's
in Bensenville. That's saying something. I would think that would be the place you'd want to be in the zombie apocalypse, zombie virus, but I don't know. They don't have toilet paper. We can lower
Katie,
our standards.
tell us what you're writing about for tomorrow on Fraud Friday.
Well, on Friday, I'm writing about a art seller who sold fake paintings and used it as collateral in a $6 million fraud scheme. And what he did is I assume he made them. Maybe he purchased them from someone else, but he knew that these were fake paintings. And he actually applied for multiple loans, at least 3 or 4 loans there. There might be more. He didn't list all of them in his plea, but he would claim sometimes the same painting over and over again, saying that it's an official painting, claiming to be the curator or the parent of one of these artists selling the artwork, and then he would default on every single loan.
I think
Chris, I don't know about you, Chris, but I don't understand art well enough to use it as collateral.
Definitely not. No. And if you're going to keep pledging the same piece of art over and over again, I just think that's a lazy thief. But what do I know?
Very good. Let's see. We're running out of time. These are our new reports that are going to be done by Friday. So 2020 performance reports as well as compensation. And I want to talk a little bit about, and then the webinar, we have the webinar next week on collateral. Lance is going to do a 10-tab guarantee package. And we're repeating major new SBA rules. Actually, that's a placeholder, Lance. We think we'll have the new SOP and we'll incorporate that into that as well.
Well, don't be surprised if it gets pushed. Everything seems to be getting pushed these days.
Well, and the thing, Bob, I wanted to mention the new rules webinar yesterday. That was, I think, a record webinar participation. And today's Coleman report, it appears.
Yes. Thank you all for your support. Before you leave Asheville, I'm not saying it's canceled, but they are evaluating it. Malk is on. I had to cancel mine. Been in Vegas. I don't know the status of the NADCOs and Nagels, but that's 2 months out, so I think we should be okay. But just unfortunately, things are, as I said, we're in interesting times. Hey, thanks a lot for joining us. Thank you all for listening in. And I got to go to work and finish up the reports. Thanks, Chris, Katie, Lance, and Marty. Thank you very much.
Have a great weekend,
everybody. All right.